In the upper levels of the inner alchemy, Taoist inner alchemy process, there are many stories of these sages or these individuals who've reached these high levels, who have cultivated the chi and able to actually activate their lower danchan, their middle danchan, their upper danchan, and they develop these shin powers. That with these shin powers, they're able to communicate, do psi abilities, and they're able to communicate with things like elemental spirits of the land, ancestors, ghosts, gods and goddesses. And so my question is, and it goes with the whole ET hypothesis, how long have the ETs been on the planet Earth? If one can use those abilities to communicate with these beings, can one then also use this ability to communicate with NHIs?
Welcome back. I'm here again with Jeff Hardee. Jeff, good to see you again.
Hey, Sean. How's it going?
Good. Okay. So in the last episode, we talked about Qigong, Neigong, and Nei Dan. Mm-hmm. Did I butcher that in any way?
No, that's right.
Okay. I have to see it written out, and then I will never forget it. But until I actually see it written out, I'll screw it up. So how was this all related to NHI?
Yeah. So that's the question some of my professors were asking me when I proposed my dissertation. So again, I'm taking this doctoral program in ET studies from Ubiquity University. And I've already previously been working with these Neigong groups, both as a practitioner and, academically looking at them as a religious studies, new religious movement and whatnot. And they were asking me that similar question. My answer is, in the upper levels of the inner alchemy, Taoist inner alchemy process, there are many stories of these sages or these individuals who've reached these high levels, who have cultivated the chi and able to actually activate their lower danchan, their middle danchan, their upper danchan, and they develop these shin powers. That with these shin powers, they're able to communicate, do psi abilities, and they're able to communicate with things like elemental spirits of the land, ancestors, ghosts, gods and goddesses. And so my question is, and it goes with the whole ET hypothesis, how long have the ETs been on the planet Earth? If one can use those abilities to communicate with these beings, can one then also use this ability to communicate with NHIs? Either the NHIs, if they've supposedly been interacting with humanity for thousands of years, they could be the source of stories of things like fairies, right? Or of, leprechauns, or of angels, or things like that. There could be that aspect going on, or they could be recent arrivals as of, the testing of our nuclear bombs, and they are a telepathic race, at least one of the species, and therefore we need a way to communicate with them directly to initiate that communication. So one of my hypotheses is that it may be possible to use some of these abilities that you develop when doing Neigong or Nei Dan to initiate that communication with these NHIs. So that's the theory, and the fun part of it is trying to find out. Right? Trying to, one, develop the abilities, but then also to go out and try to see if we can do what the team, Jake Barber's team of, Skywatchers are doing, is to be able to call these craft or these beings and to have this kind of communication, or even go back even further and to the old days, which I kind of wish people who are in this subject would remember. There's a whole body of knowledge from ceremonial magic of individuals who are intentionally contacting beings for knowledge or for use or for relationships. And you could consider, the whole grimoire tradition of trying to, go through the whole Lesser Key of Solomon, where you have a circle, you have a triangle, and you're trying to evoke these beings and interrogate them for information. That kind of approach is somewhat similar from a spiritual side to what we're attempting to do with CE5, with what Jake Barber's protocols are, that kind of, with what Chris Bledsoe is doing in some ways. The reason why I bring up the approach that the ceremonial magicians are doing is that, unlike the people that I'm meeting in my classes, and I'm talking to those who are having these experiences of hearing communications and then simply accepting whatever the download is or whatever the voice is telling them to do, in the past, in terms of ceremonial magic, the whole teaching of is do not trust those beings immediately, that we should interrogate those beings, we should put them to the test symbolically or whatever, and then only if they pass the test are we able to have truthful communication and to learn something from them.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
So I kind of wish that this knowledge base or this approach that was used in the past, either literature or in reality for ceremonial magicians, is applied for this communication, because I am a little worried when I hear my fellow students even, or some people who are part of the courses in Ubiquity University who are teaching us, that are immediately trying to accept whatever the message is of these beings that are visiting us without asking, what's your intent? Why are you here? Let's have an equal playing field. Let's not be, secret thieves in the night, moving ships and equipment and whatnot, or whatever you're doing, or taking people, manipulating your perceptions, changing your memories and things like that. Why not just meet in the open and have an open conversation, whether it's telepathic or not? I think we need to be treated more with respect and have a little bit of a caution when we're communicating with those. So that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in this communication with NHI, to see if we can have more of a level playing field. Instead of just being on the receiving end, we can be on the initiating end. It's a tall order, but
you raise a super interesting point. So are you familiar with the work of like Steve Mera and Barry Fitzgerald?
I'm not that sure. Tell me about it.
A British and an Irish researcher. So they've been associated with, I'm not sure if Steve was part of or just studied the skull experiment. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Well, what Steve told me is when you're interacting with these entities, there's a fast way and there's a slow way.
Okay.
The fast way is like you'll get results real fast, but they can be extremely dangerous. It's like at your own risk. It's like Parsons, right? Mm-hmm. Who eventually ended up died in an explosion, right? That's kind of how the fast way can end sometimes. But the fast way involves a lot of these rituals that you're talking about. And if you like mess up or you do something wrong, like it can be really, really dangerous. He said it's akin to like, in both cases, you're trying to like connect with the president of the United States. In the slow way, which I'll describe in a second, it's like first you send a letter to your representative, then you meet with your representative, and then your representative makes an introduction to somebody in the administration, and that person makes an introduction. That's the slow way, so that by the time you get to the president, he's expecting you. The fast way is you just materialize in his office, and the Secret Service is like, should we shoot him? And the president's like, yeah, shoot him. Right? So the slow way is kind of what they did with the skull experiments, where they had they call it a circle, but it's basically a seance where you have like 5 to 7 people and you slowly refine that circle over time, over a number of months. And the entity or entities will respond, will manifest a port, that sort of stuff more frequently, to the point that you'll get to a place where as soon as everybody sits down, they're there. Right. So, and even then that is fraught with some risks. But anyway, that's according to his research, his experience. Nobody has a monopoly on the truth. Right. But that's kind of where he's kind of leaning right now. So anyway,
that sounds a little bit like, I think the Law is One group. There was a group in the 70s that was
like the raw materials.
I think so, yeah, where they try to combine some of these seances with some principles of ritual magic and trying to have this download of communication that's from these beings that's a little more equal, instead of just, something appears and then it downloads material onto you. More of a conversation.
And I think even that, now I'm going to let me just ask ChatGPT, because I don't want to just put this out there and not have like any basis for it. But I think one of the producers of those materials also had a traumatic ending.
Parsons, I know a little bit about him. There's a really good book on, I think it's sex rockets and something that there's another part of that, but which is a bit of a biography on Parsons. He was a fascinating person. He was a rocket engineer. I think he worked at JPL for a bit, but he was also into.
He was a co-founder. He was a co-founder of JPL. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was part of the OTO. He was a Thelemite. He worshipped Babylon, and a little bit controversy with his social choices in terms of social mores and what relationships he had with people, which actually, caused some rifts in that group.
Oh, I mean, L. Ron Hubbard, stole his inheritance, but not his inheritance, but stole his life savings, basically.
Yeah. So,
and I think he recovered it. I think he recovered some of it, but in a lawsuit, and then also ran off with his wife, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of things happened around that time. So, but yeah, it was unfortunate that he had that accident in his lab, but he was working with volatile chemicals. I don't know if there's a controversy of whether or not, he was set up to have an accident because it was embarrassing to NASA and the other groups that he was into this occultism or not, or if
it was after he lost his security clearance. Okay. So he was trying to fulfill a contract for some explosives for this, he's just making a living, and he was rushing to fill this order, and he dropped some fulminate mercury or something like that, and then that just boom, the rest is history. But I wasn't wrong about this other guy. So Don Elkins, co-author of the Raw Material, I'm just going to read this. An essential figure in the Law of One series, passed away on November 7th, 1984, at the age of 54 in Louisville, Kentucky. His result was the result of a self-inflicted gunshot wound following a period of declining mental health. Mm-hmm. So there was also, it was in the middle of a standoff with law enforcement, too.
Ouch.
So because I think he feared that they were going to try to institutionalize him. So there's a lot of, who knows, it could just be coincidence or...
Yeah, but it's actually one of the challenges it's been one of the difficulties for the whole UAP ET subject is, in the early days when the public was getting more interested into it, a lot of people were vilified as being crazy. And, it was even categorized at one point in the psychological manuals as if somebody did have a belief in UFOs, that they would be typed as being delusional or something. So there's that material. But then at the same time, people are having these experiences. As somebody who studies religions, you could look at various mystics across the centuries. They're having these visions. They're having these out-of-body experiences. They're having these wounds that appear on their bodies and bleedings, right?
Stigmata. Yep.
Yeah, that are associated with their prayers or their being really fervent in their belief. Is that mental illness? And then fast forward to what we seem to be getting confirmations of from all these whistleblowers and whatnot, and from people like Chris Bledsoe, of actual experiences that are being recorded, not just witnesses, not just hearsay, but on video, on infrared, on radar and whatnot, and seeing that there are these craft, and potentially eventually we'll get video of beings at some point, because there's going to be some conscious being that is piloting these craft that are able to have these communications with us. And if you speak about that, how are you supposed to integrate that into your life? Do you just accept, like I'm seeing, as somebody who's interested in religions and new religious movements specifically, I see more and more people who don't have a discernment filter on, that when they receive something that is other, right, that is not them, they immediately fall back onto old paradigms of religions that they were brought up with, or whatever the cultural paradigm is, and say, I just got contacted by an angel, or a demon is trying to talk to me, or because it is a voice in my head, it must be higher and better than me, and therefore I must do what it says. Why? Why not just ask the question, who are you? What do you want? Why are you communicating with me? Give me some kind of proof of your good intentions, and then let's have a dialogue like respectful, conscious beings that we are as
By the way, the intelligence community has had the ability to do that since the 60s, right? Voice to skull. Right? Like, they can do that, right? It's like a rudimentary technology. It's not fancy. So you should always have discernment when, you shouldn't assume it's nefarious. Like, you should think about, what are they asking me to do? You're reminding me of a lot of random things that are extremely relevant, but still random. So you're familiar with like John Dee and Edward Kelly, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, they were starting to communicate, like the whole Enochian script came from this communication, and he thought he was communicating with angels. He may have been communicating with angels, right?
Yeah.
Maybe angels are not necessarily, who knows? I'm not even going to get into any of that. But at one point, these beings like commanded John Dee to like engage in wife swapping.
Exactly.
And then like after, I mean, it's, like we're not passing any judgment on, if you choose to do that in your own time, it's on you. But there were consequences, right? Like, the relationship between Edward Kelly and John Dee broke down, and then John Dee's path kind of spiraled downward after that.
And so the controversy is that John Dee received the communication through Edward Kelly, who was the seer, who was actually seeing the communication. So how much of it was the angel telling Edward Kelly, tell Dee this, and it was Kelly saying, I'll use this opportunity to get a little wife swapping in, and he just went ahead and told Dee anyway. So that's the problem.
I didn't know that part of the story. Yeah, so it's like
intermediary.
Yeah, so you have to have discernment. It's almost, God, I'm reminded of all this random stuff. So it's like the Zohar. You're familiar with the Zohar, right?
Yeah.
Apparently,
Jewish Kabbalah, right? Yeah.
It's like a book of that, but it's highly controversial. And I've been told this. I haven't read it anywhere, so take it with a grain of salt. But my understanding is that in Judaism, they discourage you from partaking of the Zohar, of reading that book, until they ask you to wait until you're, first of all, like, you're an expert on Kabbalah and like do all your work, but also that you be grounded, that you've already had a family, you've already had children. So they generally discourage men from looking into it until they're, and it's for whatever reason they say men. I'm not judging it, just like whatever the culture was. Not to look into it until you're in your 50s. And people who have kind of looked into it beforehand, like, there are like people in insane asylums who have like gone into deep study of that, and then have just not escaped or gotten out. So whenever you're in communication with whatever you're in communication with, you should always ask questions like,
right,
would wife swapping in this case serve me in any scenario? And generally, I would think, given social stability and things like that and common sense, it's probably not a good idea, right?
Yeah. Or what's the greater goal of growth or spirituality for doing this thing? Does it serve me or whatever? Like, there is a practice in the AA, which is that reformulation of the Hermetic or the Golden Dawn by Crowley, wherein at the neophyte level, you are meant to gain control of the astral plane. Now, how do you test for that? Do you just say, you candidate, initiate, go get this control and just tell me when you got it, and I'll check you off and move you on to the next stage? No, in the AA, they actually test you. So what they do is they give the candidate, this is according to the documentation, they give the candidate a symbol, and they say, go do the exercises we've taught you about going into the astral plane, go find this symbol, communicate with the beings that you encountered there, and when you come back, tell us about that. And then the tester, the proctor, has the list of what that candidate should be encountering based on what previous initiates have already encountered there, as if it is another realm that can be visited, just like you go and visit France or something. And if the candidate is able to say that their communication is in line with what the testing answer says, then they pass. And if they don't, they say, well, you didn't really travel on the astral plane, or you went somewhere else. Try again. And you've got to keep going until you get the symbols right. So, yeah, I think that kind of discernment, that kind of check is vital.
Well, let's I guess talk about like an example of this with discernment. So I think I took us on like a long tangent. So let's go back to
this goes back straight to Chris Bledsoe. Right?
Same or.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just finished taking a class with Chris Bledsoe. So he was kind enough to come to Ubiquity University and be able to do one of our short form graduate courses. So it was a couple hours each week for about 4 weeks. And he was talking about his experiences. He definitely has experiences. He has witnesses that are experiencing things with him, things that he sees in the distance, healings that occur around him, other kind of physical signs on his property. He's got lots of video and things like that. So he's definitely seeing something. He's got lots of government people that are coming and seeing him before he wrote his book, UFO God, and afterwards. But here's the thing. The way that Bledsoe describes his experiences is very much based on his past religious upbringing and his personal path, his personal understanding of the world. So when he gets these experiences with these others, these orbs or these beings or whatever, he's filtering it through his own religious viewpoint, which everybody does. But the difficulty is that when he's interpreting his experiences through his religious lens and then gives what he thinks is the meaning of it, or in my view, I think a lot of people, every human being kind of jumps the gun when they have these extraordinary experiences and they try to cram that experience into something that already pre-exists instead of just reserving judgment and say, we'll find out eventually.
Yeah.
Just say, I don't know, right? But I had this experience. Chris is trying to interpret it in terms of his fundamentalist Christian upbringing with an extra dash of Catholicism added in. And by doing
why do you think he added in Catholicism?
He didn't add it in. He's having an experience of a lady.
Right. And, like a Marian apparition is the closest thing in Catholicism. Lady,
yeah, which actually in his discussions is actually very much like various Egyptian goddesses. So it's
Isis,
very much
right?
Like, it's
well,
not
like Isis.
More like Nuit or Hathor.
Yep.
Nuit is the representation of the night sky. She's blue, so the lady has a blueness to her. He saw a vision of the stars in the night sky through this bull that jumped over him, which is very much like Nuit.
Hathor, right.
Yeah, so, but because he's fundamentalist Christian, he can't say that he's pagan and that he now worships Egyptian gods and goddesses. The closest thing to fundamentalist Christianity that uses a female figure, other than Gnosticism and Sophia, would be Mary, right? Yeah. And to utilize that iconography, basically. So it's an easier step for him, if I were to analyze him, to adopt Mary as part of his overall religious view, his reformulated religious view. That's fine. Everybody can make their own religion as they do, but this comes to the idea of discernment, right? His approach towards his decision to approach these experiences has been one of humility, of absolute trust, of acting as if he has no agency himself. He must beg and plead for these beings to do things for him, that he's just the messenger of what they are conveying to them. And I actually asked a question which was heavily edited by the moderator when it was asked to him. But I was essentially asking the question to Chris, is he aware that, one, does he think of himself as a prophet of a new religion? And two, is he aware that there are people who are following him and listening to what he says that do actually think that he is the prophet of a new religion and are following him in that way, which means that the things that he says, like he's making predictions, next Easter, there's going to be an event at his property that is almost like one of the apparitions of Mary, right? Or he's predicted
like Fatima, right?
Yeah, or he's predicted earthquakes or things like that. Now, is that, how do I say this? Is that something that he really wants to do? Like if I were his advisor and I would be asking him to the side, Chris, do you really want to be the prophet of a new religion? If you do, keep doing what you're doing, right? You are having these experiences. You do have things that happen. It's not like it's all being made up. Things are happening, which are verifiable, but maybe what they mean and what they are is not what you mean and what you think they are, right? Or do you want to be a little more cautious in the things that you're saying? And instead of saying, you know that this is from God, the God that you conceive of as God, as opposed to the other gods that all the other major religions may think of in a different way, are you truly in the know of what the ultimate understanding of these things are or not? Or is it just better to say, I don't know. I'm just relaying this experience. But so what happens, happens, right? I think it's a pickle. It's a pickle for somebody who is very religious themselves and are placed in a position where they are in a key messenger role for something that is happening that is definitely other, that I would say is non-human. So it's going to be fascinating from a religious studies perspective to see how this all plays out. A lot of these predictions don't come true. He's already backtracked on the thing that he thinks might be happening next Easter. He says now it may be sometime around Easter, or maybe not at his property. Maybe it's actually happening in Egypt. So that's how these predictions go. But I think it's going to be kind of messy. And I kind of wish the moderator did not edit my question. I think Chris, he's a nice guy. He's a faithful guy, but he needs to understand that there are people that are coming to his property that are seeing him as a prophet, not necessarily of Christianity, but of something else. And that may cause problems.
Did you see Lou Elizondo's comments? I don't know how recently this was, and I'm not sure exactly what led to him to make a statement like this, but he explicitly mentioned, and I don't know if he used the word cults, he may have used the word religion, but he said that there were two previous UFO cults / or influenced religions, and he explicitly mentioned Mormonism and Scientology, right? Now, Scientology has a direct link to Parsons, right? Because L. Ron Hubbard was also in the mix with Parsons and doing the rituals and briefly, right? And then he went on to found Scientology, which has extraterrestrial elements in it.
Exactly, yeah.
In the same vein, in Mormonism, there's the Archangel Moroni, who appeared to Joseph Smith. And Joseph Smith used to engage in scrying and like all sorts of stuff like John Dee and
exactly.
Right? There's like it was during a time there's like a spiritualist movement and things like that. So it's almost like maybe the government showed up because they're like, this could be the seeds of a new religion. And the reason they got there is because they're aware of these entities, particularly the lady, right? The lady is like not a trope, but it's like an archetype, right? It's like a fertility goddess. It's always appearing in the vernal equinox. And
it's been around for 5,000 years or more. This image of a feminine deity that represents the earth or represents the universe itself. It's nothing unique to what Chris is experiencing. It's really not that new. It's just interesting that it's being introduced by these other beings, or Chris is introducing it.
And it's often associated with, it comes during, like, as a prelude to, call it bad times, right? So, right. I mean, so take Fatima, right? Because I think there were like 3 prophecies of Fatima. And the first was, okay, so it was October 13th, 1917. So it was at the tail end of World War One, but before the Russian Revolution. And that was, I think, the first prediction, the first prophecy of Fatima was about if the Russians lost faith, there would be like a time of like troubles or whatever. And of course, the communist system was, atheist by definition. So anyway, there was a few. I think one of them was like the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II or something. And then the third one was, we might be. I don't know if it was ever revealed. Right, it might still be sealed, or they put something out that wasn't necessarily. But anyway, these things appear. I shouldn't say who knows, right? This phenomena appears during these particular times. It was also Our Lady of Lourdes, similar vibe. And even in Fatima, they claim it was a Virgin Mother, but when you actually interview, or even Saint Bernadette, might have been the Our Lady of Lourdes, she described like a white being. She didn't really describe Mary. It's just these, the church kind of shaped the narrative a little bit.
Makes assumptions, right?
So I think the intelligence community was aware of this entity, or at least this pattern, and they're like, oh boy, here we go again. Let's get on top of this one. Yeah. So,
well, we were chatting before we started, and Chris had said in our class that he was approached by the government and said, do not speak about your experiences before 2017. And after that is when we had the New York Times article about the gimbal and the whole secret program for studying UAP. And then Chris felt more comfortable to be able to actually write his book, UFO of God. So
interesting. So you said 2017, right?
Yeah. That was when the New York Times article dropped, and when you could say that the modern age of discussing UAPs and the first congressional hearings came out after that started.
So that's 100 years after the miracle of the sun.
Yeah.
Coincidence? Probably, but who knows?
Right. According to our Gregorian calendar, right?
Yeah, it's very, very strange. So how did he respond to your question?
So, to the edited question, he said that he didn't feel that he was a prophet, that he was just a person who was just relaying his experiences, that he's a humble person before God, and that he is trying to pray for others, trying to help heal others. He doesn't understand all this, but he's going with the messages he's given. If he's given a message, he just goes with it. He just says it. If he has people coming over who are hoping to see something on his property, if he feels the impulse or the telepathic communication, we'll see something at 6:35 tonight, then that's what he's focused on, whether or not that's actually going to be the case. So I think he's a fascinating individual. I'd love to meet him in person. Definitely, of course, go to the area and see the things that are related in his book. But I think it brings up this question of discernment, and it brings up this question of jumping to conclusions about the phenomenon and what it means ultimately. And I think, the world religions do need to have a plan in place for how they're going to explain what seems to be the inevitable revelation that human beings are not alone, that there are other intelligent beings that have societies that have lived much longer than us. They have their own religions. They have their own history that may or may not align with the religious theology or history that humans have created on our planet. So they need to have some kind of contingency plan for that. And I would personally promote discernment more so, using the standard techniques of rational discourse and, weighing conclusions and proposals, critical thinking, and even spiritual discernment of whatever form as we navigate our way through this adjustment period, so it is less chaotic than it will be. But that is upcoming. I'm pretty confident that we're going to get more and more of these revelations.
So this is just a correlation, but I think it's an interesting correlation. So over something like the last 100 years, 150 years, I'd have to double check, let me step back. So a lot of places where people have sightings tend to also be in areas, and this is Stephen Mira, Barry Fitzgerald research. Paul Sinclair also. It's on the British side,
Okay.
British and Irish side. Where these things happen, they tend to have negative magnetic anomalies, right? Where the magnetic field is reduced, right? And places like where same thing with like plasma orbs and things like that, they tend to show up in fault zones, right?
Yeah.
Again, places where the magnetic fields are a little bit weaker for whatever reason. But for the last 150 years, the magnetic field strength of the Earth's magnetic field has declined by like 15%, right? There's the South Atlantic magnetic anomaly. And I'd have to check on the map, but, like the whole Colaris, all that stuff off the coast of Brazil, maybe that's close to that.
Might be in that area, yeah.
In that area. So imagine if, again, I'm completely ignorant. I'm literally just a pattern recognizer, but I haven't delved into any of this stuff. Perhaps as the Earth's magnetic field strength weakens, these entities are able to manifest easier, or maybe there's some sort of dimensional mathematics we don't understand with quantum mechanics where, I'm merging a lot of like probably physics theories that are not mergeable, but if you think about like brain theory, like BRANE, like the M brains and stuff like that,
Right.
maybe there's like these parallel universes, the membrane between worlds or whatever is weaker and things can seep through easier.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also the same thing there's this fascination on equinoxes and solstices.
Right.
Right.
Ley lines and things like that.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So perhaps this stuff, we're in a natural cycle, where with the magnetic field weakening, that's just a symptom of some broader cyclic change that, even with generation theory, you're familiar with the four turnings and all that.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so
because
a generation is
versions of these cycles of history and things like that.
Cycles of history. So a generation is 20 years, call it.
Okay.
And each generational cycle, there's four turnings, and then there's another cycle. Okay. So four turnings, 80-year periods. It's 2025. Subtract 80. Where were we?
Yeah.
Like we're in the fourth turning. Fourth turning is a period of destruction, etc. So 80 years ago, what year was it? It's 1945.
Yeah. Was that the end of World War II?
II.
Yeah, World War II.
End of World War II. What was 80 years before that? 1865. End of the Civil War. Right? So we're in this fourth turning. It's a time of destruction, and it's where the world is effectively remade. Like the world order changes. And if you can see, right, the existing order is not serving anybody except the top 0.01%. Right? And I think at a psychic level, or at least I shouldn't say psychic, in the subconscious or unconscious, collective unconscious level, people like, there's so much negative like psychic energy or subconscious energy associated with that. Like everybody can feel the system. Like you saw it with Mangione, right? Like while we don't condone what he did, people, like it was just like, well, the system doesn't work, so of course this stuff's going to happen. Right? The system only protects the elite, so perhaps the elite should no longer, the elite are no longer going to be protected. So I just think you're seeing this cycle of this destruction of the current era, but it's all associated. And I think that's why these things, to some extent, were also impacted by our external environment, right?
Yeah.
Like,
it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, like a magnetic field will have Like if you walk through like a heavy magnetic field, you may hallucinate. You may start to see things you wouldn't normally see.
Right.
Right. So anyway, I don't have any of the answers, but I'm just trying to correlate and trying to understand.
Yeah. I think it's useful to do this kind of comparison and try to see those patterns. I think that's a good way to learn and to possibly, sort through the data and at least do something with the data rather than ignore it. I just think that people should not be ready to jump to conclusions about what things are
100%.
Until they have sufficient data. Not ignore it. There is something there. There is a there, but that doesn't mean that we understand at this stage what the ultimate truth is. I don't think anyone knows that. We need more time. We need more evolution, And what I'm proposing, at least to study or part of my dissertation or after, is to see if there are ways in which we can communicate with this other on a more level playing field so that we, using our own abilities, can initiate that conversation and require the acknowledgement of equality being we are all conscious, intelligent beings. Equality doesn't have to be we have gravity drives just like you have gravity drives. Obviously, we don't. We haven't on our own invented that. We may have received the technology, back engineered or whatever. But just the technology alone doesn't make any one species better than others. I think baseline, we can talk about intelligence and consciousness and the control that we have over our own planet en masse. And that should allow us to have a seat at the table where we can all have that discussion openly without all this obfuscation and secrecy and whatnot. I'd rather have that than a small, group of humans that try to claim that they can make decisions for the rest of the humanity because they obviously cannot and should not. We all should be able to speak for ourselves. So
I think we've already jumped the shark, by the way, on official disclosure, in the sense that it's going to come out regardless. It's too late for the government to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that they're managing it right now, it's almost like they're just trying to protect themselves. But eventually, I think those people, if they're still alive, when the collective population figures it out for themselves, I don't think those people will survive. Like, I think once people learn, at least in this country, the extent to which we've been lied to, I don't think the system survives it.
Yeah, there's going to be transformation on many levels. And it's up to the people who are having the dialogue now to be able to help guide or at least be with the people as they go through this transition.
But I mean, I think we're at the point that if the NHI chose to reveal themselves and said, pick a side, the vast majority of humanity would pick their side. That's where we are.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without knowing the consequences. Yeah.
I know myself, even if they were like hostile, I would choose them because they didn't lie to me my entire life. They didn't manipulate me my entire life. I have nothing in common with the folks who run the system right now. And the people who run the system, you don't see. They're in the background. Right? Because they're cowards. Yeah. So I don't care how hostile they'd be. And I'm on their team. Yeah. Like, it's too late.
Interesting point.
It's too late. Right? I have nothing to lose. I've been a slave my entire life and part of this system where you've lied to me. Right? Like, what do I have to fear? Death? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of death anymore.
It's not just like a lie of we've been hiding billions of dollars from you. It's a lie about fundamental technologies that could transform our quality of life across the planet.
Yeah.
That could help end our energy dependence or could help feed the hungry or expand our awareness.
Imagine how much human potential that they've squandered. You would unlock massive human potential.
Yeah. Since at least the 1930s, we can say, at least the evidence that I've seen, I can at least speak to the first crash in Italy in the early 1930s.
Magenta, right.
Going forward, yeah, there has been some activity here on this planet.
Yeah, so like if they came out and they said, oh, they're hostile, I'd be like, that craft that just landed in my backyard, I don't believe you, because everything you've told me is a lie. I'm going to go walk up to it, and if they kill me, it's your fault anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've destroyed your credibility, so why should I believe you?
Yeah, I'd rather speak to the other party directly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd rather have a dialogue, and if I have to risk my life for that dialogue, it's worth it, because you people have squandered my life. Right? I could have done a lot of things, but if I hadn't been, slaving away to provide for my family and just to survive. Right? So like, if death is the risk, fine. Right? I've risked my life for this system, and this system didn't give a shit. Right? Yeah. Like I served in the military. I risked my life for them, and what do? They continue to exploit me in the shadows, whatever, right? To their enrichment, to their personal enrichment. So, yeah, I'm done. But I'm not saying that, people should rise up and like, look, until there's an alternative, I'll continue to be a good little slave and, try to stay out of the limelight and not make a fuss and,
that's one of the challenges.
Pay my taxes to the tyranny, and exactly, which doesn't serve me at all, right? Not at all. Yeah. I spend 55% of my time working for the government, right? With all the taxes that I pay. And I'll continue to pay those taxes. I won't make trouble, and I'll, follow your insane laws and like deal with your insane censorship and et cetera, et cetera. But when push comes to shove, if you're in some sort of conflict with whatever this is, right? Like, I'll take my chances with the unknown than stick with the known liars. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And that's one of the challenges. It's one of the policy challenges, I guess you could say, and why I like to bring the graduate work I did in globalization to bear on this question, because there still will be a transition. Whatever the new understanding is, whatever the new technology is, whatever the new neighbors are, it's not going to be instant. We're not all going to be given instant free energy the next day. It's going to take decades or generations before humanity transitions into this new modality. I mean, one potential modality is that one of the species decided to leave their planet for whatever reason and learned about Earth, and they decided to move in. And they've already started moving in, and then they're going to reveal their presence and say, we're here. We're here to stay. Better to ask forgiveness than permission, right? But we have things to share with you, and now we're going to be co-inhabitants with you on this planet. That's one scenario. That's actually a more positive scenario in some ways. It's still rude, but it could be positive.
Yeah, it's like an alien nation scenario, right?
But there's going to be this transition where we need to be able to live with each other in some ways and to both benefit. And if both species benefits, then maybe it's not so bad for humanity in the end, right? But that's going to take time. That could take generations. So we need to be able to war game it out in a way. We need to be able.
Well, I mean, the other scenario is we're a colony of some other extraterrestrial civilization that operates in the shadows, that controls.
In that case,
everything.
I'll be one of the first rebels to fight.
Yeah, well, I don't know how I would behave in that scenario. I would probably, the people I would target would be the collaborators, right? Those are the people. I got no beef with NHI. I got beef with people who betrayed their own species, right? For self-enrichment. But exactly. I can come up with dark scenarios all day. These people could be the Zuckerbergs and Bezos from 11,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like they could be the dirtbags that let the rest of humanity suffer through some massive cataclysm, went underground, and now they're working or collaborating with the elites who going to quietly control, behind the scenes, make policies, etc. In that case, like, I hope humanity gets wiped out, because if those are the only people who survive, right, there's nothing. there's nothing useful in those genes, right?
Yeah. I think collectively, I'm a little more positivist on that side. I think collectively, as a species, I lean more towards Star Trek than Star Wars in some ways, even though I practice with what people would consider to be the Force, in that there is a drive for humanity as a species to grow, to expand, to learn, and to improve itself. And I think that even if, a small group of humans, are in one area, that drive will continue. And hopefully our race will continue in that positive way.
I think Bledsoe, we were talking about Bledsoe a lot, might be closest to what the real reality is. It's almost like this ultra-terrestrial thing, right? Where they're in HI.
He's interacting with that aspect of it, and there may be multiples. It's totally possible. It's all speculation. We won't know until we know.
Yeah, or it could be like the Lay's control system, with these things they're just like puppets, right?
He's relayed stories where the orbs come around and then beings come out of the orbs, like 7-foot tall beings that come out of the orb. So that would mean that there's some kind of dimensional warping going on, right? If you have a small orb that's basketball size and a 7-foot tall being comes out, if that's a physical being, then clearly there's some kind of space-time warping for that being.
Yeah, you can constrict space-time, right, to make the orb smaller, right? And then you expand space-time. And I think let me think about that. If you're compressing space-time, I don't know. I don't know enough physics to do that, but that's how at least if you're compressing space-time in front of a craft, you make your destination come to you faster, right?
Seem to come faster, yeah. But I guess one question is, all the space in between that you're compressing, do the things that live within that space get squished? Do they even know that that's happening, right? Or is it just like regular, experience for them, and then suddenly it just appears on the other side? Is it actually squished, or does that heavy gravitational warping cause that craft to move out of our space-time into another dimension, and then it travels and pops back into our space-time? And that way,
if it's a wormhole, yes. But
some of the descriptions that some of the Lou Elizondo talks about, some of the scientists that describe it that way, that the heavy gravitational manipulation causes the devices to move into the fifth dimension or something. They travel for a distance in the fifth dimension, and then they pop back into our dimension. It looks to us instantaneous, but they actually are moving around, not going through.
Yeah, it could be both too. It could be, it could be one or the other, who knows. But that's why if one of them is moving away and they're expanding space-time, that's why you see, by the way, I think he had it backward in his book, but as one of these craft is moving away from you, you see like that blue color. If it's moving toward you, you see gravitational redshift, which is the compression. So you never want to be under a UFO, because there's also a frequency shift into like higher frequencies. So you move from ultraviolet into like X-rays, cosmic rays, like that's why you get these you get irradiated. So at least these are theories, right?
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I became a MUFON field investigator, is so that I can get these cases locally and investigate them and try to see if I can get a little closer to understanding the phenomenon, through real cases that people are reporting. So it's been pretty interesting.
Has that been consistent, like that sort of, like with radiological injuries?
I, as a new field investigator, I haven't had to go out to a site yet to do radiation testing. But I mean, you can mine the database and look for reports, and every now and then there are physical effects on the surface that you can detect radiation with. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think we've kind of we went all over the place on this one.
Yeah,
I think it was interesting, but any final words for the audience?
No, I would say, just keep an open mind. These are subjects that have been talked about for a long time. Like the term psi has been used in the past. It's not really new. It's old things being repackaged. And I still think the scientific method is important. And I think that our critical thinking skills and our discernment are going to be vital as we move into more understanding of whatever this phenomenon is.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff. It was an absolute pleasure. And I really enjoyed kind of just taking random things that I've learned in the last 3 years and kind of playing simpatico with some of the things that you've been talking about. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate the opportunity.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.